Before there were songs, before there were instruments, before anyone had a word for music, there was sound, and your ancestors were surrounded by it every single second of their lives. We talk about the history of music, but that question has a much older answer hiding beneath it. What did ancient people actually hear? What sounds filled the world before civilization? And what did humans do with those sounds long before anyone invented an instrument? The answer reaches back further than you'd expect, and it changes how you hear the world around you right now. Because sound was never just background noise. The oldest confirmed musical instrument is a flute. It was carved from a vulture wing bone and found in a cave in southwestern Germany. It is at least 40,000 years old. But here is what that date actually tells you. By the time someone carved that flute, humans had already been making and listening to sounds for tens of thousands of years before that. We just haven't found those earlier sounds, because most of them left no trace. Sound is invisible. It evaporates the moment it is made. So archaeologists have to read the evidence left behind, the shapes of caves, the wear patterns on ancient bones, and the structure of the human vocal tract itself. What they have pieced together is remarkable. The most dominant sound in the ancient world was nature, not peaceful, playlist-friendly nature, constant, unpredictable, loud nature. Thunder, wind through forest canopies, rivers, insects, the calls of animals that wanted to eat you. Ancient humans were not listeners by choice. They were listeners by survival. The snap of a twig meant a predator. The change in bird calls meant weather. The direction of running hooves meant food. Hearing was not entertainment. It was data. But humans being humans, they didn't just listen. They responded. The first sounds humans intentionally made were almost certainly percussive. Hitting things. Stone against stone, hand against hollow log, bone against bone. Archaeologists have found bones with strike marks that could only have been made by deliberate rhythmic tapping. Some of these bones are 100,000 years old. Rhythm came before melody. Before any tune, there was a beat, and that beat did something extraordinary to the human brain. The brain has a region called the basal ganglia, the part that controls timing and movement. When you hear a steady beat, that region fires up automatically. You don't choose it. Your body starts to synchronize. It is called entrainment, the tendency of the body to lock onto an external rhythm. Every human culture ever studied has this. Every single one. Now add the voice. The human larynx, the voice box, is positioned differently in humans than in any other primate. In chimps, it sits high in the throat. In humans, it dropped down. That drop let us create a vast range of vowel sounds. It also, not coincidentally, made us much more capable of choking on food. Evolution traded the risk of choking for the ability to speak. That trade happened roughly 300,000 years ago, which means the human voice was ready long before the bone flute, and ancient people used it relentlessly. They chanted. They called across distances. They made sounds to comfort infants. They made sounds to warn the group. And somewhere in there, they started to make sounds that had no practical purpose at all. Sounds made for their own sake. That is the moment music begins. But here's the part most people miss. Ancient sound was not passive. It was a technology. Sound was used the way we now use writing, broadcasting, and medicine. Take the caves. The most famous prehistoric cave art, Lascaux in France, Altamira in Spain, is consistently found in the parts of the cave with the best acoustics. Researchers have measured this. At Lascaux, the zones richest in animal paintings also produce the strongest resonance when you clap or shout inside them. Those early humans chose those spots on purpose. They painted where the rock sang back. Now consider chanting. Repetitive, rhythmic vocalization has been practiced by every human culture, from Arctic shamans to Aboriginal Australians to medieval monks. And neuroscientists have found out why. Sustained chanting slows the breath. It synchronizes neural oscillations across the group, meaning their brains begin to pulse at the same frequency. It floods the body with endorphins, the brain's natural painkillers, and social bonding chemicals. Ancient chanting groups did not know the neuroscience, but they knew it worked. Then there is storytelling. Before writing, the voice was the only archive. Every piece of knowledge, how to hunt, which plants heal, which are poison, lived inside the spoken word. Ancient oral traditions were designed to be heard, felt, and remembered. The rhythm wasn't decoration. It was memory technology. Rhyme, meter, and repetition act as hooks that make information cling to the brain far longer than plain speech. The oldest known epic poems, the Iliad, the Epic of Gilgamesh, were not written first. They were sung, for centuries, aloud. before anyone wrote them down. Sound was not what happened before civilization. Sound was how civilization was built. So what did ancient people listen to? They listened to everything. They listened because their lives depended on it. And then they began to make sounds back, not because they had to, but because something in the brain demanded it. The chant, the story, the rhythm. These were not primitive attempts at music. They were the full, complete auditory world of beings as intelligent as you. The next time you hear rain on a roof, or wind through leaves, or a crowd of voices all at once, you are hearing what your ancestors heard every single day of their lives. Sound is the oldest thing you have ever experienced. Older than language, older than fire, older than anything we built. You were born into a world of sound, and so was every human who ever lived. The world was never silent. It never asked permission.